Hello and welcome back to South Park Explained on No Bullshit. Today we've got a special episode to talk about because not only is the recent storyline of Tegrity Farms coming to an end, but also South Park's parody of President Trump is returning this week as well. This is all happening in this week's episode, which is jokingly called Season Finale. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this thing and figure out why. Things start off with Randy and Tally hosting a sort of talk show, a podcast kind of thing, happening in their farmhouse at Tegrity Farms. Things quickly get disrupted here though as the police come in and shut them down. In fact, Randy is being arrested here and he is immediately brought into the South Park City Council meeting in handcuffs, where they have a bone to pick with him about his recent shenanigans. Randy and his Tegrity Farms business have really gone off the rails this season, and now finally Mr. Marsh is going to pay for all the crazy stuff he's done in South Park this year. For example, the mayor here recaps a few key events, which basically sum up this season's previous episodes too. Things like Randy blowing up all the private farms in town, so people will be forced to buy plants just from him. Then Randy also had a parade for himself, and even he slaughtered a bunch of cows needlessly and made deals with Far East countries too. Also, he almost poisoned the town with his Halloween special line of plants as well. This all prompted the mayor here and the city council to bring Randy in and spell out to him in no uncertain terms that everyone is sick of Tegrity Farms. This results in Randy going to jail here, where he'll await trial for his many crimes. Then the mayor says she's happy South Park can get back to normal, which then leads to a hilarious cut to the South Park boys who are playing football outside. Cartman here uses some pretty vulgar language to call plays too, leading to him finally hiking the football after a while. But before we move on to that, I want to first go back and discuss this "we're sick of Tegrity Farms" line. This whole introduction here we just went over is rather meta and self-referential too, if you think about it. If you've been following along with this show and reading comments online and stuff like that, like how I have, you would know there's been a growing sentiment among the fans that the whole ongoing Tegrity Farms storyline is getting a bit old and repetitive. I was still fine with it for the most part too, but I can see where they're coming from in these criticisms as well. Really seems like that premise has run its course, and clearly the South Park creators have heard that criticism and they agree with it enough themselves to not only wrap up the storyline quickly with one last hoorah here in this episode, but also South Park is jokingly making meta references to itself as well, and winking at the audience while they do it. Good sports they are, and they're rather smart too. A weaker, more defensive creative team might have tried to double down and force more Tegrity Farm episodes down our throats for the rest of the season, but South Park did right and learned to back off here. And clearly, as you'll see throughout this episode, they too are ready to move on and get back to regular South Park, which is what I predict will happen with next week's episode. Back to the present now though, as the boys play their football game and things are supposed to get back to normal as the mayor said. Well, what ends up happening right after that is pretty tragic, but it also leads to the return of some previously interesting characters for this show too. Here Cartman throws a pass a little too far, which leads to his receiver running out into the street and getting fatally hit by a cop car. This immediately leads to the boy's funeral, where we discover his name was Jason White. Next, Jason's father goes on to give a speech where he complains about there not being many people at the memorial service there, and also he says how people just don't care if the police kill one of the whites. This line obviously has multiple meanings too. First and foremost, it harps back to the main joke about the white family in South Park and the gimmick they use every time they show up too. While they are also named the whites and they complain about people not treating them well, this is of course also them representing all white people in the world as well, at least for the purposes of these jokes. So when his father complains about the public not caring about when one of his family members dies, he's also joking around about how the real public doesn't care much when a light-skinned Caucasian person dies as well, at least not as much as they care about the minority ones. This example is further amplified by the cops being involved here, them being the ones that ran over the boy in this episode, and also the police are another touchy subject in the public today, especially in relation to deaths caused by cops. But as this joke and the episode allude to, the public in the news and mainstream media and pundits in the entertainment industry, they really don't care as much if whites are the ones who are losing their lives. So while this family in South Park is portrayed as over the top and whiny and playing the victim a bit too hard, but at the same time, the references and points they make, mostly coming from the dad, well, they are usually true and accurate statements and sound criticisms of the treatment of his people. South Park plays both sides here in that way again, even though it might just seem like they are goofing on this family and who they stand for and represent. Back to the Tegrity Farms story, next Sharon Marsh tells her kids about their dad Randy Randy getting arrested. But instead of getting upset or worried here, the family actually gets happy and excited because they might get to move off that farm, which they hate. Next, we see Randy in jail, and he's calling in for help from another returning character for this episode. President Garrison comes back here, and he tells Randy to use the method he uses to get out of trouble. He always flips the accusation around onto the accuser, and then he tries to play the victim among other fast-talking, dodging methods which he uses to control conversations and situations. This, of course, is a goof on the real president, Donald J. Trump. That's obviously who President Garrison in South Park is a parody of too. Him sporting the Trump hair, the spray tan, and his classic suit attire, often with a red tie too. And while you might think this joke and parody would trigger a conservative and Trump supporter like myself, well, I hate to break it to you guys, but I have quite the opposite reaction. Unlike the left, right-wingers like us can take a joke, especially when it's coming from the masters of comedy at South Park, who always know what and who and how to goof on people in a way that makes us all laugh. For example, notice how this joke specifically, it's not really addressing any issues or taking any sides politically. Here, Matt and Trey are just having a laugh at the way the president likes to get himself out of trouble and how he has a tendency to play head games and turn things around back onto the person attacking him. And it's hard to deny Trump acts in these ways sometimes and oftentimes. And we still love him for it too, but also it is something that is ripe for parody as well. So the South Park crew were justified when they decided to take a crack at this. Glad they did this too. This joke not only brought back another beloved character, but also it brings in a new one after we find out Rudy Giuliani was under the president's desk during this entire scene. But Giuliani wasn't doing something naughty like what's jokingly implied. Instead, really, he was picking up the pistachio shells which the president had thrown on the floor. This also implies he's sort of Trump's lackey now in real life. And that's not the biggest stretch to say either, since Giuliani does work for Trump in the real world. He's been Trump's personal lawyer for a while now, and also Giuliani has become known to go out and speak for and support the president publicly, on TV, in the news and radio, and what have you. In addition, for those who don't know about him, Rudy Giuliani is a longtime politician and former mayor of New York City, where he did some great and historical work cleaning that metropolitan area up and making it a much safer and more appealing place to live, which was once one of the most dangerous places in the country. So, needless to say, Giuliani is a seasoned politician and lawyer who's done a lot of good and service, and he's also a great conservative and Trump ally in the present. But besides that, he is a bit of a character too, and he looks and acts funny sometimes as well, so it's really no surprise South Park is making a parody of him as well. The main gags for Giuliani are pretty physical here too, since every time he's on screen, Rudy's teeth are falling out and he's popping them back in, like he has dentures. And also, Giuliani does this little hand thing where he claws at you or something, and he does it a few times in this episode too. And both these hand goofs and the teeth one, they are based on accurate and apt descriptions of how Rudy acts in real life. In this story, in the episode, Rudy Giuliani pops in because President Garrison is going to send him to Randy Marsh to try and help him get out of jail by using the dodging tactics of Trump, which we discussed earlier. Back at the farm now, the Broflowskis bring the Marshes some food, thinking they're going to be sad and hungry since Randy has been arrested. Turns out though, like before, the Marsh family is actually taking things really well. So well, they're having a bit of a party with everyone there, and having a good time without Randy there too. That is until the White family decides to show up, and they're still upset and crying about losing their son. And also, it turns out, these guys are supporting Randy and his side of things as well, saying they're upset Tegrity Farms is shutting down without him, because they want some more of those green plants for themselves. They're apparently big customers there. And this dire situation prompts Cartman to step in and try and help the mourning White family. He suggests they find another kid for their family to take care of to replace their old one. And Cartman even says he knows exactly where to find someone to adopt. This leads us back to the ICE detention center, another reference to an earlier episode from this season. There we see the ICE cops from the Mexican Joker episode, the season premiere. And this time they are giving a tour to American parents, including the ones from South Park. This holding location has become a sort of adoption location now, but it looks and feels more like an animal pound where you would adopt a cat or dog. That is the joke, of course, and the reason ICE is giving away kids here is because they were born in America and that gives them automatic citizenship, but their parents were deported for being illegal and trying to sneak into our country. And this is yet another joke and another real-world reference that I think we can see in two different ways. Sure, liberals will look at this and think South Park is just specifically mocking ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, and the left would also say this whole child separation meme is their fault, and it's evil, and it's the conservatives' fault and what have you. But when I look at something like this, I see things much differently. It's not a stretch to think South Park is also commenting on birthright citizenship laws, which are part of the reason things like this happened in the first place. Either way, there's clearly a problem here too, but the left's solutions to it are by far worse, and they're the most taxing and expensive ones too, with no end in sight, no game plan, just spend, spend, spend. Really, the obvious and easiest ways to fix something like this is either to build a wall and defend our borders better so people can't sneak in, or you could deport the kids with their parents. But since deporting citizens like that is a little trickier, perhaps it is time to rethink and rework birthright citizenship laws as well. But as we all know, instead of going with these easier and cheaper options, Democrats instead decide to promote more unfettered illegal immigration, and they think our country should be forced to take in and take care of and pay for anyone who sneaks into this country, no exceptions or questions asked. And to me, it's pretty obvious which of these routes is better and more reasonable and more forward-thinking, and not to mention, our side's solution is sustainable for far and near future purposes. But if we went with the left's policies, this country is going to be overflowing with immigrants and illegals in just a few decades, and we're going to go bankrupt while we're doing it too and become another socialist shithole. In the end, as Randy's arraignment begins in court, most of the citizens of South Park arrive in support of Randy being convicted, chanting, "Lock him up." The whites, however, are the only ones who are protesting in support of Randy. Then, as Randy begins to use the defense given to him by Garrison and Giuliani, who are also present at this arraignment, well, instead, he decides to have a change of heart and he gives up on that strategy. Then, as Randy begins to take responsibility for his own actions, a series of explosions occur outside and interrupt things. Outside, we see Alejandro, the adopted boy from the ICE detention center, and he now has his face covered in white sunscreen, which was put on him by his adoptive father, Robert White. And now, Alejandro is on a rampage of destruction throughout the whole town. And with that lotion on his face, the police now believe he is the Mexican Joker they're looking for. The cops then attempt to take down Alejandro, but he escapes in the very last moment. Finally, Randy then is exonerated of all his charges, and he solely thanks the whites for their support. Back at Tegrity Farms, snow begins to fall as Randy tells his family that this year's planting season has now ended. He then turns to a camera which has been filming all of this and thanks the viewers for their support of Tegrity Farms, as he announces the harvest's last crop of the season, which is for sale now, which he has aptly named Season Finale. That means this is the second episode in a row named after one of Randy's plants, and also it's another title that has multiple meanings as well. Season Finale is not only being used to refer to the end of the Tegrity Farms storyline, but also it references a plant within the episode. Perhaps Tegrity Farms will come back one day in some small ways, but I think if it does, it won't be a main storyline going forward, as it appears South Park has sensed that the fans were getting sick of this bit, so they themselves were happy to move on as well. What did you guys think of this episode? Was Season Finale a fun return to form for South Park? What do you think will happen next week? And what other current events do you hope they cover in another episode? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.